Imagine opening your laptop on a Tuesday morning, and you see an email from the category buyer at Target or Whole Foods.
Oh, the dream scenario.
Right. And attached to it is this purchase order you've been chasing for like 2 years.
Time to pop the champagne.
Exactly. You pop the champagne, you take the team out to dinner, you feel like you crossed the ultimate finish line. But what you probably don't realize in that moment of pure euphoria is that statistically, within 6 to 12 months, your product might not just be off that shelf. Your entire company could be out of business.
Yeah, the graveyard of consumer brands it's filled with founders who thought securing the purchase order was the final step.
Yeah.
I mean, getting on the physical shelf is a massive validation, obviously, but staying on the shelf, that's a test of your actual, operational survival skills.
Okay, let's unpack this because today's deep dive is entirely dedicated to passing that exact test. For you listening, if you're a startup or an emerging brand, a solid relationship with a retail buyer is way more valuable than just having a shiny new product.
Oh, 100%.
We're looking at this really comprehensive methodology from Retailbound. It's a channel management consultancy founded by Johann Jacob, and they've helped scale brands across, I think, over 150 North American retailers.
Yeah, over 150. And the core premise of their guide is that brands fail because they view the retail buyer as this, gatekeeper to conquer rather than a strategic partner to cultivate.
Right. But before we get into the actual tactics of maintaining that relationship, we have to talk about the psychology of the person sitting across the desk. Because I think founders tend to visualize buyers as these powerful, relaxed executives. Right?
Sitting in a boardroom doing taste tests all day.
Exactly. Making subjective decisions about what tastes good or looks cool.
Yeah, and the day-to-day existence of a modern retail buyer is, well, it's much closer to organized chaos. I mean, they are managing hundreds, sometimes thousands of individual SKUs. Literally thousands. And their internal performance metrics are entirely based on maximizing sales per square foot and expanding profit margins. So if a brand comes in pitching this grand vision without acknowledging that underlying stress, the conversation is already over before it starts.
It totally reminds me of the dynamic in, a crowded hospital emergency room.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Right, because the triage nurse at the front desk is just dealing with a waiting room full of absolute chaos. When you walk up, they don't want to hear your life story.
No, they definitely do not want to grab a coffee to discuss your dream.
Exactly. They just need to know where does it hurt, how critical is it, and how quickly can we process this solution to keep the line moving. You have to prove you're there to solve their bottleneck, not, create a new one. Make their life easier.
That analogy captures the operational tension perfectly. Walking into that metaphorical ER and proving you won't create more paperwork is what the industry calls being retail ready.
Retail ready.
Okay. Yeah. And if a brand isn't fundamentally retail ready, the relationship just shatters the moment the first stress test happens. If you overpromise and underdeliver, trust erodes instantly.
So let's actually play out a scenario of a brand that thinks they're ready but isn't. Say a startup lands this coveted end cap display. Week 1, sales are through the roof. Week 2, they run out of inventory.
Yeah.
The founder's probably celebrating a sellout.
Oh, yeah. To the founder, it's a huge marketing victory.
Right.
But to the buyer, it is a catastrophic failure. I mean, an empty shelf is $0 per square foot. It means the buyer's manager is going to walk the floor, see dead space, and immediately demand answers.
Wow.
And this really comes down to the first pillar of readiness, which is supply chain stability and your OTIF score, your on-time in full score. Buyers track if your shipments arrive on the exact scheduled date with every single unit they requested.
I want to dig into the mechanics of that for a second. If I'm supposed to deliver, say, 10,000 units on Tuesday, and I deliver 9,000 units on Wednesday.
Your OTIF score takes a massive hit.
But why is the buyer so unforgiving about a 24-hour delay or a 10% shortfall? It seems a bit intense.
Well, it's because retail logistics are built on highly synchronized just-in-time inventory systems. A late truck means the receiving dock at the distribution center might not even have staff available to unload it.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Right, and a short shipment means the automated allocation system, the software that distributes products to 500 individual stores, suddenly throws an error. That requires manual intervention.
So you basically just force the buyer to spend 3 hours fixing your mess.
Exactly. You became the bottleneck. And, the same structural problem applies to pricing. A brand might calculate their margins based on their own survival, but they constantly fail to reverse engineer the retailer's required cut. Do the margins actually work for both you and the retailer?
This is where we see so much early attrition, isn't it?
Tons of it. A brand will secure placement, but they haven't factored in promotional allowances, slotting fees, or just the mandatory margin the retailer needs to hit their own internal goals. If the math doesn't result in a net positive for the retailer's specific category, the buyer literally has a fiduciary duty to swap your product for one that does.
Which brings up the marketing side of the equation. Because there's this persistent myth out there that once you secure the real estate in a major chain, foot traffic just kind of takes care of the rest.
Oh, I wish. The retailer is essentially just a real estate provider. They give you the shelf. You still have to provide the customer. I mean, how are you driving traffic to their stores? Brands that rely entirely on passive store traffic are usually the first ones to get discontinued.
You have to push your existing audience through their physical doors.
Exactly.
And then there's the technical back end. Things like packaging compliance, labeling, and electronic data interchange. EDI.
Oh, EDI. The unglamorous plumbing of retail.
Yes. I know it's dry, but I've seen startups completely derail because they couldn't get their EDI working.
Yeah.
Why is this such a formidable hurdle?
Because EDI isn't just, sending a PDF invoice via email. It is direct, automated database-to-database communication. It's between the retailer's inventory software and the brand's warehouse management system.
Right.
So when a cashier scans your barcode in Ohio, EDI is the protocol that eventually triggers a purchase order for a replacement unit in your system. Setting it up requires specialized software, strict data mapping.
It's heavy infrastructure.
Exactly. If a brand tries to fake this capability and relies on, manual data entry, the error rate spikes, the retailer system rejects the invoices, and the brand's payment gets delayed indefinitely.
So retail readiness isn't just having a shiny product package. It's having an industrial-grade logistical backbone already functioning before you even take the meeting. Okay, so let's assume a brand has built that backbone, right? The supply chain is humming, EDI is mapped, the product is on the shelf. The guide shifts focus here to how the founder communicates with the buyer moving forward. And the core argument is basically a complete abandonment of the founder's passion in favor of clinical data.
Yes. Data over passion.
But I really have to challenge this premise. Wait, isn't a founder's passion their biggest asset? I mean, it's what got the product made in the first place. It attracts the initial investors. Why suppress that when you're trying to convince another human being to believe in your product?
What's fascinating here is that the distinction lies in knowing the audience's incentive structure.
Yeah.
You're right. Passion is highly effective for consumer marketing and founder stories.
Yeah.
Because those audiences are buying into a vision. But buyers are evaluated by their finance departments. They speak in metrics. They cannot deposit passion into a corporate bank account.
Okay, that makes sense. But how does a brand new startup bring clinical data to a buyer when they don't have, years of historical performance to reference?
They look at external category trends and competitive awareness. You don't need your own historical data if you can synthesize market data. If you can show, say consumer search volume for eco-friendly packaging is up 15% nationwide, and your product is the only one on the shelf featuring that packaging, you are bringing a mathematical argument, not an emotional one.
You become a category captain.
Exactly.
And then, once the product is actually moving, that mathematical argument evolves into metrics like sell-through rates and GMROI. We hear GMROI thrown around a lot in retail circles, gross margin return on investment. What is the actual mechanism behind that metric?
Think of the buyer as a landlord managing a high-rise apartment building. Every product on the shelf is a tenant. GMROI is the rent.
Okay, I like that.
The calculation takes the gross margin generated by the product and divides it by the average cost of the inventory just sitting there. The buyer is constantly evaluating which tenant is yielding the highest return for the space they occupy.
So a tenant paying high rent but requiring constant maintenance might actually be worse than a lower-paying tenant who causes zero issues.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. A product might have a lower overall price point, but if it turns over rapidly and requires zero markdown support, its GMROI could significantly outperform a premium product that just sits dormant on the shelf for 3 months.
This totally transforms the conversation with the buyer. You aren't pitching the taste or the design anymore. You're proving how your product complements the shelf assortment rather than cannibalizing existing sales.
Oh, cannibalization is a massive red flag. If your product just steals a customer who is already going to buy a competitor's item anyway, the buyer's overall category revenue remains flat. You merely move their money from one pocket to the other.
You have to bake a bigger pie.
Exactly.
And keeping the buyer informed about how you are baking that pie leads to my absolute favorite tactic in the retail-bound source material. Here's where it gets really interesting. The tactic is proactive communication, specifically the good news update.
Yes, this is such a good strategy.
The psychology here is brilliant because, generally speaking, most brands only call when they want an order or when there's a fire.
Right. The mere sight of a vendor's name in an inbox usually triggers like a low-level stress response for a buyer. They just assume a new problem has landed on their desk.
But flipping that script is incredibly powerful. The tactic is to send a super short update when something positive happens externally. Let's say a brand's TikTok goes viral or they get a press mention. The founder sends a quick email saying, hey, featured in this publication today, driving a 20% spike in traffic directly to your category page. No action needed, just keeping you in the loop.
Adding no action needed is the operational magic in that email.
You just became the only vendor that week who gave them positive news and asked for zero labor in return. It proves you're out there selling for them.
It fundamentally alters the power dynamic. The brand stops being a needy dependent and starts acting like a parallel growth engine.
Okay, so assuming a brand establishes that parallel growth engine, the logical next phase is expansion, scaling up, moving from, say, 50 test doors to 500 regional locations. But the strategy for asking for that expansion requires a lot of nuance, right? You can't just walk in and say, put us in more stores and we'll sell more volume.
No, because asking the retailer to blindly expand your footprint places the entire financial risk on their shoulders. A strategic brand frames expansion as a mutual capture of demand that the brand is already manufacturing. They want to see a vision for growth that doesn't just rely on their specific shelf space.
The source outlines a really practical example for this. A founder goes into the meeting and says, we're planning a heavy digital ad spend in the Northeast next quarter. To ensure we don't create out of stocks and frustrate customers, let's discuss increasing inventory allocations specifically for your Northeast distribution centers.
The phrasing there is crucial. The brand isn't begging for shelf space for prestige. They are warning the buyer about an incoming wave of consumer demand and offering them the opportunity to capture the resulting revenue. It shows you understand the actual mechanics of retail, not just the prestige of being stocked.
But operating at that expanded scale basically guarantees that the laws of physics will eventually catch up with you. Screwing up is inevitable. Supply chains break. A shipment gets delayed, a production batch fails, or, someone misprints the barcode so they don't scan.
The statistical probability of a supply chain failure over a long enough timeline is basically 100%.
Which, this raises an important question. If we know buyers are ruthless about metrics like on-time delivery, human instinct tells the founder to hide the problem, right? They hope the container ship makes up time, or they try to quietly fix the barcode issue before anyone notices.
Yeah.
Why does the retail-bound methodology demand radical transparency instead? Won't confessing to a failure get the brand discontinued?
No, because buyers live in the physical world. They know logistics are fragile, and they'll usually forgive a messy supply chain. What they actively penalize is being blindsided.
Right.
If a buyer's VP walks the floor, points to an empty space where your product should be, and the buyer has no idea why it's empty, you just humiliated them in front of leadership.
You made them look incompetent.
And that destroys the partnership permanently. They do not forgive being blindsided by empty shelves. To survive a failure, a brand must execute a very specific 4-step crisis playbook the moment a disruption is identified.
Let's break down the mechanics of those 4 steps. Let's say a shipment to the retailer's distribution center is definitely going to be late. Step 1 is immediate acknowledgement.
Yes. The founder initiates contact the hour the delay is confirmed. Identify the delay with the specific purchase order number.
Okay, step 2 is explaining the impact. The buyer shouldn't have to calculate the damage themselves.
The communication has to be factual and devoid of emotion. This means the inventory will arrive at your facility 3 days past the scheduled delivery window.
Clear and simple. Step 3 is providing the solution. And this seems to be where the brand has to prove their loyalty by taking a financial hit.
You cannot just drop the problem on the buyer's desk. The email continues, "To mitigate this delay, we've upgraded the freight to expedited shipping entirely at our own cost."
You bleed a little bit to protect their shelf space. Then we reach step 4, preventing recurrence.
The buyer needs to know they won't be dealing with the same headache next month. Outline the structural fix. We've installed a new protocol with our warehouse for all future shipments.
So acknowledge immediately, explain the impact, provide the solution, and prevent recurrence. It's an incredibly clinical way to handle a crisis.
And operating this way often results in a stronger relationship than if the shipment had arrived perfectly. It proves the brand has the operational maturity to manage chaos without requiring the buyer to hold their hand.
So what does this all mean? Pulling all these threads together for you, the listener, securing your spot on the shelf for the long haul isn't about charismatic sales pitches. The physical product is merely the cost of entry. It's about reliability, data-driven insights, and a commitment to mutual success. Ultimately, your goal is to consistently make your buyer look good to their bosses by driving sales and eliminating headaches.
The transition from vendor to partner is fundamentally about reducing the friction in the buyer's professional life.
You essentially want to make them look like a genius for betting on your brand in the first place.
Absolutely. Though there is an underlying assumption in all of this that I think merits some deeper consideration to live everyone with.
Oh,
Yeah. The entire retail-bound framework we analyzed today is heavily predicated on how brands must adapt to the human buyer's intense data-driven world, right? We explored how to alleviate the stress of an overwhelmed triage nurse.
managing the human element.
Exactly. But retail is shifting more and more toward automated algorithmic purchasing. Major chains are deploying AI to manage standard replenishment and evaluate SKU performance. So, one has to wonder, how long until the retail buyer isn't an overwhelmed human managing hundreds of SKUs, but an AI evaluating your GMROI in milliseconds? What happens to the relationship then?
Wow. How do you send a proactive good news update to an algorithm?
You don't. The machine will just scrape consumer search volume autonomously. If your metrics dip below the acceptable threshold, the system could automatically generate a delisting notice without a single human conversation ever taking place.
That makes the logistical discipline we discussed even more critical.
Mhm.
You won't be able to charm your way out of a missed shipment. If getting a product onto a major retail shelf feels like running a marathon today, founders really need to prepare for a future where the judge at the finish line is just a line of code.
The rules are continually evolving. Brands just have to build the infrastructure to run the race, no matter who or what is keeping the score.